Hi there, and welcome to another episode of Live with Littledata. I'm Edward Upton from Littledata, and I'm joined today by Manav from Tydo. Welcome.
Yeah,
So,
thanks. Really excited to be here, Edward. My name's Manav. I'm one of the co-founders and CTO at Tydo, and really excited to join you.
excellent. Well, really excited to have our partnership. So I think what we want to talk today a bit about is how the kind of server-side tracking and event-level tracking we can do at Littledata is really helping power some of the reporting and segmentation products that Tydo is building. And if you want to find out a bit more about products, I've just done a quick QR code. I'll leave those up in the screen a bit. I'll do Littledata first and then Tydo in a moment. So I think we started to see this trend where brands are finding, okay, I get the need to have super accurate tracking, but I may be finding the reporting gig analytics to be either limiting or just too much like hard work to build all the customization in. And I want to have a product that can help me with that and help transform some of that raw data into real insights. So tell us a little bit about how Tydo solves that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll maybe start by talking a little bit about where we started, kind of where we are today, and some of the AI use cases, particularly on the AI side of things that rests on the customer segmentation data, a lot of which we can help get from Littledata. And so where we started, we launched in 2020, and we launched as an analytics product to help brands really understand their profitability. And so really dig into that. We were mostly working with small and medium-sized businesses, scaled that up to about 2,000 brands. And as we started working with larger and larger brands, we started getting feedback that they were actually interested in more sophisticated data products. And so that was exciting to us. And we were talking to brands that they were going to either spend a couple $100,000 spinning up a data warehouse, hiring a data engineer, building a five train integrations, and kind of getting this whole slew of data products where we found we can kind of serve them by building out this verticalized data stack for them so that they could get their custom data warehouse, their custom reporting, all this fun stuff, so that they could actually just run their business. And so we built that out, worked with brands like New Era, Buck Mason to really scale out that offering. To your earlier point, as we started working more closely with brands, we really find that we can actually provide the most value by just serving them with actions and recommendations. A lot of the times, anyone running growth or an e-com is doing 10 different jobs at once. And so they don't necessarily have time to go all the way down to do the low-level analytics and then all the way back up to do high-level strategy. And for that, we can really provide a lot of value by helping brands by just showing them these kind of actions and recommendations that they can take to actually grow their business. How we do that is kind of with our customer segmentation tool. And so we help brands really understand who their key customers are and their behaviors, and then they can go activate those customers in tools like Klaviyo or run campaigns in Attentive or PostScript. And a lot of those pieces really are built upon that event level data that we get from Littledata or other different kind of channels. And so at a high level, though, our goal is really to build workflows to help brands understand who their customers are and then help inform their acquisition and retention strategies. And so today, the AI workflows that we've really built out are leverage AI to help brands sift through a lot of data at scale, identify their key personas that they want to engage with, and then help those brands drive the LTV through more personalization, tools like Klaviyo, Attentive, PostScript.
Yeah. And one of the challenges, I mean, I was talking actually last week with another partner, Grid and Pixel, about, kind of difference between good personalization and bad personalization. Like, the challenge is that if you do it wrong, it's worse than no personalization at all. Sending the customer a wrongly timed message about a product they weren't interested in, or maybe a product that they were only interested in, a month ago because of some seasonality, is kind of worse than just sending them the headline list. And so, what do you see as the sort of barriers to doing personalization well?
Yeah, I totally agree with that. It really is. And so when you talk about personalization is all around the customer, right? And so if you don't know who the customer is or who's actually taking the action or viewing your page or any of these things, you can't actually drive any of that personalization because you can't really connect an event to actually a purchasing pattern or some customer profile in your Shopify instance or in Klaviyo. And so making sure you do that identity resolution is actually one of the biggest pieces to make sure that you can drive that personalization at scale. And so one piece is the kind of identity resolution, which sets that foundation.
Yeah, and I guess that's where Littledata comes in, because I think that the challenge that we're all seeing is that the kind of the traditional data capture or tracking on your website that you would have had a couple of years ago is just declining in quality, and there's a few reasons there. It's partly about sort of cookies expiring, and particularly Apple and their iOS WebKit browsers kind of basically stopping cookies even when the user hasn't wiped them, but also just generally a number of other tools that generally either block tracking scripts or wipe cookies automatically. And so there's a general sort of limitation now on the window that you can track the user over. And the problem there is you're not getting the full lifetime customer lifetime. So you're not really you can understand maybe what was the last touch that brought them to purchase, the last campaign, but obviously quite typically that is something like an email, or but it doesn't really give you any insight power in terms of what brought them onto your list in the first place. What was the bit of content or campaign or product that first engaged them? And so I think that's what, as you say, that's exactly what we're trying to do at Littledata, is using server-side tracking to better fill in the gaps that's being lost in that customer journey. It's not a magic bullet. There's still we can't sort of track users when they haven't consented to be tracked, where they blocked us, but we can actually, in quite a lot of cases, join the dots of sessions that maybe previously didn't look like they were connected, but actually if you do join the dots and you connect them to the same user, suddenly you have a lot more an analytical power to understand what is driving that sale, or that driving that customer engagement.
Yeah, that's such a good point. And you're right. Like, you really need to have that entire customer journey to be able to understand that all of the touch points that someone takes to maybe how engaged they're in or interested in it, right? If someone just visited your website once in the last couple of days, that doesn't really give you enough signal. The way that we kind of like to think about it is being able to help brands kind of, I get to the holy grail for retention marketing. So understand what's the right channel to target their customer on, when the right time to re-engage their customer with is, and then what the actual correct offer is. And if you can't actually get that time series data, it's really difficult to get to when the right time to engage with them, right? You would need to know if they visited your website a week ago, 10 days ago, maybe like three months ago, something like that journey. The same goes for the email data, right? You want to be able to understand, did they open an email today, yesterday, etc. And when you think about kind of the offer to be able to get a customer to kind of come back and make that other purchase, it isn't enough to just get one touch point of what they bought one time, right? You really want to be able to see what they're actually actively interested in. And for us, being able to pull in that data and get that active interest, you're starting to need to pull in things like what types of pages they're visiting, what types of emails they're opening, because that then can help us unlock a lot of more interesting use cases of being able to target that. And then the same goes for channel as well, to see kind of what channel they came in from, what channel they're most buying. And oftentimes you can get that from UTM. There's a lot of interesting ways to do that there.
Yeah, sure. But you're right. There's a fundamental point there, which is often missed, which is there's quite a lot of tools that and Shopify themselves, have tools that you can build segments based on the customer's purchasing history. You can say, hey, I want to look at people who purchased 4 times or bought this product. That's one level of detail. But so what we're talking about is actually tracking all the events in between the purchases, the browsing events, the times they nearly purchased but didn't quite, or the times they clicked through on a newsletter but didn't actually add to cart. And that's what gives you the rich targeting opportunities, and that's exactly what we're able to do by combining tracking both what's on the storefront with what's on going on behind the scenes and the actual purchasing. You get both those things together.
Yeah, and I think another important piece there is that when you think about any type of AI or ML model or any really type of predictive model, all of these things scale by the size of the data. So the more data you put into it, the better type of recommendation you're going to get into it, the better type of context you can feed into it. If you have denser information that pulls in something that's more relevant to the context but can condense a lot more information into that context window, And so when we think about that, going from that order level behavior to say I made a purchase or I abandoned a cart and really going one level deeper, you get just a lot more events. You get a lot more data. And with that, you can build much richer profiles, but also just more complex models because of the size of the data as well.
Yeah, right. And that's it exactly. So one of the things we think about is sort of enriching the data on an event level. So as an example, if you add Klaviyo's for standard add to cart tracking, they'll track in an event to Klaviyo which says, that you added a product name and a product quantity to cart, basically like one thing. That's all you have, right? With Littledata for the same event, we can tell you the SKU, the color, the other products they have in the cart, the customer ID, the customer geography, the customer average order value, that all of these other properties that we're basically enriching into it. Which, okay, you can, on one level you say, well, that's kind of, I could look that up after the event, but it's actually really complex when you get into the segmentation data modeling to have to basically, that's where you have to use these expensive tools, sort of ETL tools, to actually pull in all these other data sources and join them together. This is where it's super complicated. If you've just got basically a structured data layer that has, for every event, it has all of the event properties already there, all of the things that you might want to sort of group that up by, makes it a hell of a lot easier to actually work with that data set, both from a human angle, a human analyst actually writing something in SQL, but also I think in time for a machine analyst to sort of understand and group that up.
Yeah, no, totally. And I think a really important call out there is that if you think about the actions that you want people to take, you need to have a much more richer context of the product to either incentivize a type of action. I think it's really smart to be able to pull all that information in at the variant collection or whatever level and pull that journey in. Because for us, when we work with brands, we'll think about what type of collection they want to recommend, just because a different type of brand may try and optimize and group their products and think about their products in really different ways. And so they may be thinking of, okay, great, how am I incentivizing the next purchase on the collection level? Or how do I make sure that if someone's bought a men's or women's product, or a medium or large product, or looking at medium and large projects, how can we make sure that that information is captured over time as well, and in that. And so it's really interesting in that piece, but it does make me think simultaneously of this idea that all of these things are kind of what I like to call, a lot of people call it, just garbage in, garbage out, right?
Yeah.
So the idea of any type of data model, any type of reporting that you do is if the data that you put into it is garbage, the data that you're going to get out of it is garbage.
Yeah.
And for us, for really the foundation of all of our products is that horizontal data layer, where we do a lot of this data processing. It is so helpful to have cleaned event level data come into that, because if you don't have that foundation, then everything downstream of that will have either not the data, the recommendation that you're looking for, or it'll just kind of put out something that isn't that interesting or is just irrelevant. And so being able to make sure that we have that clean data at the foundational layer coming into it is just critical for all of our downstream products.
Yeah, no, thank you. Well, that's kind of what we specialize in, and we think of accuracy really in two main senses. I mean, in terms of the actual volume and particularly the purchases and revenue that are being tracked, you need all of the events in there in terms of throughput. But we also, as I said, think about it as actually in terms of richness of that data set for every event, all of the actual product properties and customer properties and all the properties are present in the right way. And so I think both things are important. Obviously, if you start building reports and the headline number, revenue number is off, then the whole rest of the stack is just people lose confidence at all. But equally, as we just discussed, if the event properties or dimensions are not accurate, then the ability to do the segmentation and sort of pattern recognition is diminished.
Yeah, exactly. And what we found is spending that time on that data layer and really making sure that we have that clean data layer has made a lot of the personas and audiences that we can help brands build through our AI tools a lot richer and better. Because by the time that we process the data, we spend a lot of time and work actually integrating into our pipeline to make sure that all the metrics we show actually align with the brand's business strategy, whether they have a custom definition of net sales or they process returns in a particular way, that type of thing. We'll make sure that's built into the entire pipeline. And so we have these very clean data models and data layer that can then be fed into a really context and or a really information dense way into context windows and models that can then drive that personalization, so that by the time we get these recommendations of an audience you can look at, they're really high quality. We've actually also built in the AI workflows to actually evaluate the lift in sales that you can see from these personas that we're generating, and then integrate that into the rest of our product workflows.
Cool. So yeah, I mean, just before, I want to ask you some more questions about AI, but just before we do that, let me just explain a little bit about people listening about kind of how it works together. So, so basically, you can, if you're a brand on Shopify and it's only going to work for you on Shopify, you can basically install Littledata's tracking for Google Analytics. That also feeds from Google Analytics into BigQuery, and Tydo can then use that raw data set from BigQuery to build the segmentation. So basically, you're leveraging the fantastic free stuff that Google's giving you in terms of Google Analytics and BigQuery, and leveraging, on the one hand, Littledata sort of tracking accuracy, and on the other hand, Tydo's kind of explanatory power. So it's really easy to set that up and have a go. Do contact either of us if you want to find that out. But yeah, let's talk a bit more about sort of making the data ready for AI. Now, I think you have a slightly different view to me about kind of when this is likely to happen. And I think it's obviously very hard to predict, right? These things have come on in leaps, and then maybe it feels the last couple of years maybe like a bit of a plateau. But I mean, I feel like at some point there will, there will be some sensible like structure, but Gen AI that's good at looking at structured data sets and can kind of understand the schema and pile in with a question. But I think your view is that there's maybe another step has to come in, or two steps have to come in between before that's useful.
Yeah, it would be an incredible world in which we could kind of work with a fully Gen AI data analyst. I mean, as someone who works in data, the holy grail is being able to work with a model that can answer and query all my data directly for me and infer schemas and be able to do all those rich pieces. My personal view is that all of these models are predictive. And so the way these models under the hood work is that you have a certain set of characters, like words, that come in, and it just predicts the most likely set of words after. So if you have the quick brown fox, most likely the highest probability word is jumps come after that, right? And so that's just fundamentally how a lot of these models work. They're probabilistic by nature. And so that also means that if you have the same input, there is some probability that the word that is predicted is not jumps after that sentence. And as also like a data practitioner, it's really important to me that if someone asks a question, they get the right answer every time with the data. It's very critical, and that for any type of query, if you are looking for an answer, you get the same answer and it's the right answer each time. And so the layer that I think really unlocks a lot of these use cases is still relying on a lot of these models to take a very wide and natural language query and question. So really trying to dig into that information, but you need a middle layer to be able to take that kind of natural language input, convert it into something that can actually speak to your data model, and then have the data model do the heavy lifting of how you calculate things, and like an API data layer. Really, it's an API layer in front that takes the natural language, converts it to something that can then be executed against your data model and come back. And if you build the product in that way, you end up getting the same answer every time. That's always a possible answer, right? Like you want to have an answer that makes sense, and that kind of construction helps get you there.
Yeah, no, I see that. But I guess it also predicates on two other things though. First of all, you've got to have a kind of consistent schema, a structured data set that actually has a consistent schema, because otherwise there's no way the AI can sort of make valid comparisons across different different product lines and stuff. And I think that's one thing that I think sometimes people don't think about. Is like, okay, but I'm not going to be able to sort of reverse engineer this. I can't go back in time and collect all this stuff in the right way. And obviously, the second predicated part, as you say, there's some sort of context about what that all means. Like the AI's got to understand a mapping that this is the product identifier, and you can join that to this thing over here, which is also a product identifier and has more information. So I think it's that there's sort of semantic layer in there it's a little hard. I mean, I actually think it's easier. One of the reasons why I'm actually excited about people using like standard tools like Google Analytics. So I think it's much easier because that's such a common data set. The sort of Google Analytics to BigQuery data set will be one of the most common marketing data sets out there. I think it's much easier for people to build that standard layer.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think the semantic layer is a really good way to put it. We spend a lot of time building basic customer and product models that we then get used across all of our different downstream product services. And a lot of that, I mean, we spend a lot of time talking about personalization and all this stuff today, right? Like all of that's predicated on knowing who your customer is and being able to build that clean pipeline to be able to make sure that works. And so the same goes for products. If you're not collecting the correct product metadata and cleaning it in the right way, then all of this, it's much harder to build all of these downstream use cases.
So let's talk a little bit more about the possibilities for segmentation and personalization. Like we talked a little bit. Obviously, one use case there is to push an audience into Klaviyo, perhaps to get a particular message. Are there other ways you can, if you can find a particular group, maybe of people who look high potential but haven't purchased recently, maybe that it's a sort of RFM segment or something like that. What are the other ways that you could use that?
Yeah, that's a great question. We do have a proprietary RFMT model that we built. And so I think what we found is, for those recency, so understanding and normalizing your customers across how often or how recently they've made a purchase, frequency, so how frequently they come back, how much money they've spent is the monetary. I think tenure is that T that we found is adds a little more leverage to how well we can segment your customers. But the cool piece is that we can build these models.
What does the T stand for? Tenure.
T's for tenure. Okay. How long you've been a customer for.
Okay.
And what we can do is use these automated RFMT scores, and we actually have models internally that'll help define definitions of like what a churn customer is versus not, and like combine that information with RFMT scores. So we put that together, and we can suddenly get a really good picture of who your low, medium, and high risk customers are. And so you take that piece and then you combine this with the idea of like, maybe I can use models, and how do we think about using AI? We talked about product recommendations, right? How can I join that product recommendation at the customer level, but make sure that I'm only targeting, like the piece where these come into play that I think make the most sense and are really great for a business is that you take the product recommendation and you can turn that into an offer to re-engage your customer with. But now you're only actually targeting the subset of customers that are high and medium risk. And so that avoids actually providing offers and trying to kind of push people to make a purchase who already would have made a purchase. And that type of information can actually save your business a lot of money.
Yeah. Because I think it goes two ways, isn't it? There's on the one hand, people are kind of overspending. So the interesting thing about email marketing is obviously there's a direct cost implication of kind of emailing people that maybe didn't needed to. There's an indirect cost because you may be emailing them voucher codes that they didn't need to. And one of our other partners was talking about how they did some testing with, because Klaviyo has their own sort of predictive insights built in, right? But I think that those are quite generic, and what they found is that compared to their model, Klaviyo's was kind of over discounting by 75%. So they're basically saying the customers were very high risk when they weren't. And obviously what that means is you're giving away a load of margin to people who probably would have bought anyway. But then the final thing is actually the kind of what I might call the cost of sort of inbox placement. So if you email a huge group of customers and most of them are disengaged with that email, in the modern world that means that your email is just basically not getting into some people's inbox, because the way that email providers like Gmail and Yahoo and stuff gauge they look at the engagement metrics of the email and go, this is something we should be putting into people's inbox. So basically, by doing much more targeted emailing or SMSs for that matter, you're basically likely to get a better inbox placement because those people have more people click through on the email, more people have opened it.
Yeah.
And so I think there's a sort of, you can think of it as a kind of enhancing, doing better segmentation is actually enhancing the deliverability of your list.
Yeah, that's a great call out. And I think the final piece here is that being able to do this segmentation, being able to understand your high, medium risk customers of churn actually is helping you capture a lot of lost revenue that's sitting on the table. And so we spent a lot of time talking about personalization, but it is also really important to recognize that there's a lot of customers that are kind of just sleeping that you can reactivate. And if you can understand who those customers are with this kind of AI persona generation that we can help create, understand the products that they're buying, you base that off of their purchasing journey using tools like Littledata and that event level data, then you can actually capture a lot of lost revenue in a really effective way.
Awesome. I think that's all we've got time for this week, but thank you very much for enlightening us. Look forward to doing more with Tydo. I think there's lots of exciting stuff we can build together. And I think it's really great that this is something, honestly, I'm very interested in all the opportunities here, but it's not our core product. And I think what we have to respect when we're scaling our businesses is that there's just only so much you can do. And I love partnering with people who are effectively downstream to us, who are making use of all the clever stuff we're sending in.
No, this is great. Thank you for the time. And as I said, like, we can't build our segmentation products without really understanding who our customers are. And Littledata has been a